The Champions League round of 16 is upon us, and today I'm joined by Jon Mackenzie and JJ Bull to ask the question, who will win? Now, there's some delightful round of 16 fixtures upcoming. Jon, what's your favourite? What are you going to focus on?
I've got my eye on PSG versus Liverpool. I think that's a really fun one with two teams that are really in good form at the moment.
It's a fun one with two teams, that one. And what about you? Does yours have two teams?
I've prepared something on Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid.
Well, that's going to be an exciting one, JJ, and we'll come back to talk about that shortly. We'll start with Liverpool PSG. And now I know we've covered Liverpool pretty extensively, Jon. So tell me about PSG. What's interesting about them? Apart from the fact there's two teams in the game they're about to play.
Yeah, it's an important factor in most football games, I suppose. But yeah, PSG, really the form team at the moment. This calendar year, they've been hot, Joe. In the 14 games they've played, in that time, they've only dropped 2 points, so 40 points out of a possible 42.
Wow.
They've actually ramped up their goal scoring in that period as well, so they're scoring more goals than they were in the first part of the season. So really interesting from that point of view. Is this going to be good form that carries them all the way through to the Champions League final? But I think there's an interesting sort of rejoinder to all of this in that if we actually look at the games that they have lost this season, there's 3 games and they came in the Champions League against Arsenal, Atletico and Bayern Munich. Now, what do we know about those 3 teams, Joe?
Big. They're big teams.
They're big teams and they're still in the Champions League round of 16.
They're
so
still in.
These are the sorts of teams now that PSG are going to be coming up against. So the big question is whether or not those early losses were simply because PSG weren't at their peak, or whether or not now that they're at their peak, they're going to start moving through these teams with a little bit more ease.
Very interesting. Well, the thing I find interesting about PSG is that they were, until fairly recently, Jon, a Galacticos team, by which I mean they were a team that had many big, large players concealed within them. Lionel Messi, Neymar, others, but I think many of those players have left now. They're a bit of a different proposition these days, aren't they? What are they?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because what has happened is that they've taken a slightly different route in terms of squad building in the last couple of seasons. They've done 2 things in particular. I think they've lent into their academy. They're trying to bring young players through and build a younger core of players in that squad. But they've also gone back to their French roots in the sense that they've realised that a couple of things, I guess. One, that they have the best development league probably in the world at their fingertips. So they're looking at bringing players through from other French teams into their squad at a young age as well. But also they've been bringing other French players back from around Europe. So players like Ousmane Dembele or Lucas Hernandez, bringing those players in to just give the team a real French flavour as well. But it actually represents quite a significant shift in terms of what you see in their squad build-up. So if we look at the 21-22 season, so whenever this was 3 years ago, we can see that they've got all of these peak age players. So these are the Galacticos players that you're talking about. So players like Lionel Messi, as you said, but we've got Neymar in here as well, Mauro Icardi, not to be forgotten, Sergio Ramos as well. So the idea being, bring in these peak players who are elite players, and we should be able to carry ourselves to the Champions League final, win those games. And almost worked on occasion, but very much less emphasis on the French core.
That's a very small French core.
Very small French core. There were more French players here, but they didn't get significant minutes, so they don't show up. But yeah, you've got Kylian Mbappe, who they obviously bought already as a bit of a Galactico star, right? Mm-hmm. So you could even include him in the Galactico section. Presnel Kimpembe as well. And then we've got these young talents. These 3 are still at the club.
It's also worth saying Hakimi and Donnarumma, whilst they technically were young, they're also huge players already, right? So they're hardly like young players coming through an academy. Yeah,
you could throw, as we've said, Kylian Mbappe, Hakimi, Donnarumma. All of those could be thrown into the Galactico section.
And then you've got 2 left.
Yeah. If we fast forward to the current season, we can see that there's a much more balanced mix of players here because, yes, we still have the peak age players, but not many of these you'd consider to be Galacticos. And, we've even got Vitinha in here who was brought in as a youngster and has become a peak age player. Then we've got the French core. And what's interesting here, I think, is that not only are they bringing through these young French players, but they're giving them significant minutes as well. So Warren Zaïre-Emery is a 17-year-old when he first broke through. He's been getting significant minutes. Desiree Doué, but Bradley Barcola. These are really exciting French players who are getting a chunk of playing time. And then, as we mentioned, Dembele and Hernandez brought in as sort of adding to that French flavour. And then we've got these young talents as well. And again, not just are these players young players who are coming through, they're young players who are coming through and getting minutes as well. So João Neves has played a significant chunk of the last couple of seasons. We've got Nuno Mendes still there, but Pacho brought in from Germany, Gonzalo Ramos, Lee Kang in, so bringing young players from around Europe into that team to give the squad a bit more of a balanced composition.
And how do they line up?
Yeah, well, they look quite different then from what they looked like 3 years ago, because I think if you throw up this sort of rough starting 11, you could maybe throw in Desiree Doué or Warren Zaire-Emery in this sort of spot. This is very much a team now that doesn't really have Galacticos quality, right? Like, who of these players are Galacticos to you? I mean, we could argue maybe Hakimi, maybe Donnarumma, we said earlier, but like, this is very much a different team to what we saw 3 seasons ago, where it was that front three that, just no one can really compare with in terms of talent. This is now a very different kind of team going forward.
Okay, so what does this mean for their chances in the Champions League, do you think? Like, how significantly different is it? Because obviously we said before, their previous Galacticos era kind of almost worked, like they've made it to a final, right?
Yeah, I think what's interesting about this is that the different makeup of squad means that you can play a different kind of football than they were playing in the past. I think when you play Galacticos football, you have to make a way of having all of these great players on the same team and making it work. Whereas I think now Luis Enrique, the PSG coach, has the ability to play what I would call maybe control football a little bit more, which means that they can control the games with and without the ball. So without the ball, a really easy way of showing that is by looking at a metric called passes per defensive action, which is not a perfect metric by any standards, but it gives you a good sense of the intensity of a team's pressing. Now, the important thing to remember with PPDA is that you want a smaller number because it's the amount of passes that you allow before you make a defensive action per the opponent's passing. And what you can see is that around that period that we were talking about, that sort of high Galactico era, you can see that the pressing just becomes less intense over those 2 seasons, so 21-22, 22-23. That's because you have players like Messi in your front line or Neymar who aren't going to be as intense out of possession, which we all know is the most important part of football. But as you can see now that Luis Enrique's come in and they've got this younger squad, players who are going to be more likely to be on board with the idea of doing a lot of pressing, a lot of off-ball work. You can see those numbers and then drop right down. So already you're seeing that this is a bit more of a controlled approach to football, I think.
Let me just teach you something about numbers now though, John, because what you've done there is you've committed a heinous graphic crime. You've started the Y column, the X column, whichever column it is, the one that goes up and down. You've started it at 4 instead of 0, which makes the difference between the tall one and the shorter one look like it's twice as big, but it's not twice as big, is it? This is bad. It's less than twice as big as that.
It's less than twice.
And you've made it look twice as big, almost as though to emphasise the point that you're making. And I don't like that kind of dishonesty on this show. Get out.
Sorry.
What's next though, before you leave?
Well, we've talked about control out of possession. PSG are also able to control the ball in possession, but I think when you control the ball in possession, often it can lead to claims that you're too rigid, you're too structured, etc. I think what we've seen from PSG this season is actually Luis Enrique finding ways of introducing flexibility into their structure so that you get a bit of the best of both worlds. I think the way that happens is because actually if you look at some of the profiles of the players that he's using, there's actually quite a lot of crossover between them. So, for example, in this midfield, you've got Vitinha, Desiree Doué started playing in the central midfield. They do have Fabian Ruiz who can come in as well, but João Neves too. Now, these are 3 players who have really high technical ability. They're also, I would say, sort of very similar from a physical point of view. And as a result of that, it means you can have a certain amount of flexibility. You can move those players around and rotate their positions without it making too much of a difference. So I have some slides here just to show what this looks like on the pitch. So these are some screenshots from the game against Lyon recently. PSG playing from left to right here. And I've just highlighted the midfielders in particular. So you've got João Neves in the deepest position here with Desiree Doué and Vitinha ahead of him. Actually, interestingly enough, we've got Ousmane Dembélé, who's nominally playing as a 9 here, dropping into the midfield as well, being able to help out, which just adds to that level of flexibility. This is 5 minutes later, and we can see now Doué in the wide position, Vitinha in the deeper position, and Neves out in the wide area, just holding width, interestingly enough. And then one more example of this. Actually, one thing that they like to do in this game in particular is push Hakimi, the fullback, up. But when he's up, they shift this midfield triangle across just to fill out the space on the other side of the pitch. You can see again Neves now in the deepest position, Vitinha almost playing as a 10, and Doué dropping in almost as a winger. Now, one of the other things they can do is with this situational back 3 is that if they want to push Nuno Mendes up the pitch as a bit more of an advanced fullback, then one of these midfielders will drop in to cover them as well. So you're retaining the structure, but you've got a level of flexibility within that. And I think this is also true for their front line as well. So they've got a really, really flexible front line at the moment. So Ousmane Dembélé, you're probably familiar with seeing him playing in wide areas. They're actually playing him much more central at the moment. He's having a great season, 6 16 goals this calendar year,
Wow.
which is, I think, in the big European leagues, the highest goal scoring of any player.
I would say it's a lot.
Yeah, fact check me on that, someone.
Well, the comments certainly will.
Yeah, they will. But we've got, in this game against Lyon, Dembele playing as a more central player. They brought in Kvaratskhelia from Napoli, who, again, most people would expect to see playing on the left. In this game, he's on the right, but he can play really close to Dembele in the centre. He can drop in and sort of move in between the lines and sort of play as a floaty, sort of more of a 10 kind of player. And then they've got Bradley Barcola, who, again, he can play. He's played across the front line, a bit more of a width-holding player that can operate on either side. So, again, they can rotate these players around, make it harder for opponents to track them if they're working in a sort of man-to-man orientation. And I think this is really fascinating aspect of PSG this season, the fact that, yes, they are playing a fairly sort of rigid positional structure, but they have the flexibility within that to cause problems. But I think it's worth saying that this leads to what I think is maybe the most interesting aspect going into the Champions League round of 16, which is there's always trade-offs. If you're going to be more flexible, if you're going to play in this kind of way, there's going to be downsides to it. And I think one of those downsides that you get with flexibility in these sorts of situations is that often when you lose the ball, you can have players in situations where you might not necessarily want them to be. If you have a lot of rotations, then when you're doing those defensive transitions back, it can leave you a little bit exposed. And that is the area that I think PSG will have to address in these later fixtures in the Champions League. Because as we said, the games where they struggled this season have been against those big Champions League sides, where actually you're starting to see these sorts of aspects becoming a negative part of their game. The other thing to add is that this midfield in particular, now let's assume that Fabian Ruiz is going to play in these games just because he offers a little bit more physicality, but this is such a lightweight midfield. Again, in those moments where you're having to deal with defensive transitions, that's where you can get eaten up. There was a game against Arsenal at the beginning of the season. The levels of physicality were just nowhere near where they really should be. So for me going forwards, PSG, formed team, but big questions about whether or not the physical aspect is going to be their downfall.
Little piggies in straw houses. Half. Well, that was very interesting, John. Thank you. And I'd like another interesting thing now. From you, Phil Hay.
Never work with children or animals, they say. If only Aston Villa goalkeeper Robin Olsen had heeded that advice. Olsen was a replacement for the injured Emiliano Martinez midway through Villa's 4-1 defeat at Crystal Palace on Tuesday. He went to warm up in one of the penalty areas, which, inconveniently, had already been set aside for some half-time entertainment involving some of Palace's younger fans. This led to a comedy Mexican standoff involving Olsen, the kids, Palace's Eagle mascot, and the stadium announcer. The crowd got stuck into Olsen with chants of "We shall not be moved," but Olsen refused to budge too. The fans weren't having that, and they booed his every touch in the second half. If you want a bit of fun like this every morning, and all the big stories from the world of football, sign up to the Athletic FC newsletter. It's free, and you can join by clicking on the link below.
Hey, thanks, Phil. Now, JJ, you're going to talk about Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, which is a very exciting prospect of a game. The thing I'm curious about, though, is Atletico, it's a tough fixture for Real, isn't it? Atletico may be one of the teams they wouldn't have wanted to come up against. Some might call them their kryptonite.
Well, the reason people do that is because a lot of the things that Real Madrid are best at are the things that Atletico Madrid are best at stopping and preventing. So Real Madrid like to create, Atletico Madrid like to frustrate and punch with a counter-attack. It's kind of what they do. But I'm led to believe by people mostly on the internet that Atletico Madrid have changed the way they play this year. So let's look at all of this at once. First of all, look at the teams. Real Madrid are full of absolute superstars. Mbappe, Vinicius Jr., Rodrigo, Bellingham, some of the best players in the world you've got there. They've got the absolute Galacticos there that PSG no longer have. Whereas Atletico Madrid they have great players, but they very much symbolise what the manager is, and that's like hard work and being a warrior and that sort of stuff. That's what they've been for a long time. And this is mostly what they look like, 4-4-2, very defensive, really compact, that's what they do. And Real Madrid, wherever they play at the back, because they've got lots of injury problems, they play nice looking football. And when they get in a flow state and they can combine and do all lovely passes and little 1-2s, they'll move all around, they might just wander around the pitch. There's a bit of structure, you'll always have a right back going up to give them some width. But when they get in that flow state, it's very hard to stop them from scoring. That's what you want to do. But that's exactly what Atletico Madrid are very good at doing. And also, to suggest they're the kryptonite is odd because the record they have against each other is pretty similar. I think Ancelotti's won, since he's been back in 2021, has won 4 games. Simeone's won 3, been 4 draws. It's pretty even, really. So it's not like they're really a kryptonite. It's more that Atletico Madrid are just one of the best teams in La Liga and in Europe. And so that is why they struggle to play against them, because that's naturally what happens.
What I would say, though, listen, we heard before when John made that other
Yes.
stat crime. I would say going 50-50 against Real Madrid is relative to other teams kind of kryptonite-y, isn't it?
Well, then I guess all good teams come up against good teams and they look worse because they're against a team who's also good.
Good teams are a good team's kryptonite.
That's exactly the point. And then the thing with Atletico Madrid is that they've gone on a real good run of form. They won a lot of games in a row, as you can see from all the blue here. Blue is good in this situation. And also that's put them up to third in the table. They have the best defensive record in the top 5 leagues in Europe. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Well, they've only conceded 16 goals. However,
Good Lord.
underlying numbers show that they should probably have conceded quite a few more than that. So that's one thing. Another problem I have with them is that a lot of the goals they score come in the 76 to 90 minute, and there's 15 goals in the 90 minute plus, which I think is a lot, and then not something you should plan to do. If he is planning to do it, real smart.
It's a great strategy.
I don't think it's sustainable. Anyway, so that's one thing that they've got to deal with. But one part of it is it that they are true warriors and they're battling to the end, they're machines, that's what they can do, or is it that they're getting luck at the end of games? It's a little bit of both, I think. There's this theory that Atletico Madrid are more attacking this season under Diego Simeone. I don't see it personally, and then the data kind of backs me up a little bit. There's not really an awful lot of difference in there. They're overperforming their expected goals against, which is 1 point with their defensive record, but it's not a huge amount of difference between them.
And really that's a defensive statistic anyway, so all it really says is that they are better defensively than normal.
Yeah, I think what's happened is that he's just evolved as most managers do. You just add some new things in. You don't change it, you add something in. So one thing I have noticed with them, and it's going to be the makeup of the players. So different players will give you different tactical solutions and different things you can do with them. You play differently with Griezmann than you would with someone like Mbappe. That's
I think
obvious,
he's
right?
one of the most underrated players of the last 10 years.
I think he is. I think you're right. That's a good point.
Thank you.
Well, I'm glad that someone's brought that to the table here.
Yeah. You didn't say that in rehearsal and I didn't steal it, so...
It's good that he gets his flowers now. So people will need flowers. One of the things I have noticed with Atletico Madrid this season is that what they're doing when they're building in these wide areas, what they do is they get the fullback up very high, very early. This might not sound like an astounding thing, but what's kind of funny is that normally when you play it from the back, you might have players that link and you have a little triangle and then you'll get someone in behind and you'll get the ball up to them. But what they do is that sometimes they put the ball here and then this guy will pass it inside to, say, Gallagher plays there, and then he'll immediately run super fast up the pitch. And it's kind of weird because then who goes with him? Does Rodrigo go? If he goes, then that leaves it space for him to play with. If he doesn't go, and then it's the right back, he's then stuck here, which means someone else can come into the space. So there's lots of little things they do. But what you often see is that kind of triangle changes. They go up first and high, so then you get the fullbacks up high and get crosses in the box. But also what you get is Alvarez and Griezmann drop in an awful lot, and they also move across the pitch. So you kind of push all players to one side, so that means they can play forward more quickly. So let's go to the right-hand side of the pitch. So what you might get is Griezmann pulls out wide, and Simeone, Diego's son,
Is
plays.
it?
It is, yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah, he plays there, yeah.
Oh.
So they come across. Rodrigo de Paul, you remember being like the bodyguard for Messi in the World Cup, just cleaning everything up. It's got these kind of players. Players like Barrios, really good players, right? So they can come across. You'll keep one player on the other side. Maybe the fullback would be free on the other side as well. But you get players and they put them all together. And then that way, when they push the ball forward early, they've got players all around who can then win that ball back. And so they can take riskier passes and go through. But the goals they score, the chances they create, I think when they're best is when they pull the other team towards them, open up the space, and they hit them with the counter, and they're amazing at that. Alvarez is one of the best at that, probably in the world, at retaining the ball under pressure. You've got Griezmann as well, and they've got players like Sorloth who come off the bench now and they can score goals as well. A lot of the goals they score are on counter-attack goals, so it's not hugely different to what it used to be. I'll just show you a couple of things with Atletico to see whether they are different or not. Here's them against Bayer Leverkusen in the Champions League. That looks like the old Atletico Madrid, doesn't it? Everyone in the box, basically, defending. So that's what they do. Because the principles stay the same. Here's them playing against Barcelona in the 4-4 draw that's just happened. Again, Atletico Madrid are the ones in the grey shirts. It's all about staying tight, men to men, make sure that no one's getting space, make sure you can then attack them and utilise the space that you create by doing that. They like to attack the space. That's where they can create from. That's what they do. They create space and they attack it. But here's an example of an Atletico goal, quite a typical one, I think, and the things that you embody from Diego Simeone. Now, this player here, number 12, is going to score the goal. He's highlighted down here. That's where it starts. So the ball comes in, pass forwards. You see this player in the middle of the pitch. He needs to be dealt with. This guy is going to go to him really tight. He's going to jump onto him because they want to get tight. You notice how everyone is tight to their men. Everyone's just near enough that as soon as the ball goes to them, that's when they snap. They don't stand next to them. They wait and they go onto them really fast. So the ball goes to him, he then turns, goes forward, doesn't get fast enough. The defender jumps up on this player here. So as soon as this player is going to receive the ball, he's going to be in trouble because the player jumping onto him, he's left him spare, then he goes onto him really fast, wins that tackle, possession is turned over, and immediately you see they run. Look how many players are ahead of the ball. So they have players further up because the defense is so well drilled in, like, everything's a trap. So that's what they do there. It might seem that they've got players ahead of the ball because they're out of shape. It's not, it's deliberate. I think they're waiting for the ball to be played forward because they know that defender is going to have a chance of winning it back in dangerous situations. Then they can go forward. Number 12 is at the left-hand side here. The ball's going to come to him, and then a lovely, tidy finish. And that's like quite a typical Atletico Madrid goal this year. But this is the thing. So Real Madrid don't like playing against teams who have like power and speed, acceleration, who can block them, defend really well. But when Real Madrid can get in their flow state and ping those little short triangle combinations about, that's when they're at their best. So everything Real Madrid do best is what Atletico are best at denying. But they're also really good at playing against Real Madrid. But also, it's very hard to play against Real Madrid when they have superstar clutch world players who can win games for you all of a sudden.
Fascinating stuff. Now hold your horses there, JJ. I'm going to come back to you in just a moment. But before I do, I want to say, let's look at what Opta's data and the supercomputer tells us about what will happen in the Champions League. Staying with this game, despite everything you've just said, the Opta supercomputer says that Real Madrid have a 64% chance of winning the game. I mean, do you agree?
Yes.
Do you agree with the supercomputer?
I agree with the computers, because if you don't, then they will take us all out when they eventually grow bodies and become sentient. Either team could win this, but I think Real probably will.
Well, either team could win Liverpool PSG as well. The supercomputer says Liverpool have a 60% chance of winning. Incidentally, John, it's worth saying the supercomputer says that Liverpool are the most likely team overall to win, with a 17% chance, although the fun quirk here is that they do have less of a chance of making it through each previous round than some of the other teams, presumably because they're on the hard side of the draw.
Yeah, and I think this matchup against PSG is going to be a fun test for both teams. We've already talked about how PSG are potentially going to be found out in transition moments, defensive transition moments, and Liverpool are a team who like to sit back, absorb pressure, and then pick the moments for them to have these sort of direct attacks. So yeah, I think that will be a really fun matchup for those two teams as well. But yeah, it makes sense that Liverpool will be the favourites, I think.
Well, just after Liverpool is Barcelona, then Arsenal, then Inter Milan are ahead of Real Madrid in the overall odds. Very exciting stuff. Now, what I really care about, though, is finding out who you think, not the supercomputer, but who my human colleagues think will win the Champions League. Let's start with you, John. And I know we haven't talked about the right-hand side of the draw at all, have we?
No, you're right. And there are some really fantastic draws on this side of the fixtures list as well. One that I've got my eye on is Bayern Munich versus Bayer Leverkusen. And I think these fixtures are great, right, when you get two teams who are in the same league playing against each other, because it adds a different dimension to what you might usually have here, because usually it's two teams who don't play each other very often. They don't really know how to approach one another. But these two teams have played a ton of times over the last couple of seasons. Actually, some of the best fixtures in European football, I think the Bayern derby.
Yeah. Kryptonite.
Yeah, the last time these two teams played as well, Leverkusen actually dominated the game. They found a way of pressing high on Bayern, not allowing them to get out of their build-up phase particularly well. And they're very unlucky not to win that game. So there's a world where Bayern Munich get knocked out, despite being, I think, some of the favourites for the tournament by Leverkusen here, and it makes the draw quite exciting. On top of this is another chance for us to see what Florian Wirtz can do at the highest level. He's a player that I think everyone is excited about. Probably going to be a £100 million signing at some point. These are the sorts of fixtures where you want to see him performing, going through the latter stages of the Champions League. So I'm really excited to see how he performs. Just a genius player for me, a real understander of space. Maybe not like the most physically dominating kind of player, but makes up for that with the technicality and the just the ability to feel space in a way that allows him to bamboozle opposition players. So really excited to see him playing at the highest level, on the highest stage of all.
Sounds like the ideal employee for NASA, doesn't he, really? Now, JJ, tell me something interesting about Benfica Barcelona, because the last time these teams met, you were there.
I was there. It was a very fun game. Well, how about one interesting thing from the game to look out for, to keep it nice and short? This is a photo I took of the Camp Nou. It's nice, isn't it?
It is nice.
Thank you. What you'll notice here is the high line that Barcelona play. Observe, Barcelona playing from right to left in the Barcelona coloured shirts. They are playing a very high line. It helps them tactically because they can squish teams in and then crush them to death with dribbling and passing, and they just blow teams away basically by doing that. But also, as Atletico discovered and Barcelona discovered, to their negative life state, they can just put the ball over the top of the high line. They can just ping balls over the top, and teams do this all the time.
Yeah.
That's what Benfica did constantly in that game that they ended up losing.
Right.
They work out a way to pull the team up, they ping the ball over behind, and they can get in behind, and that's basically what happens. Here's another example of it. Here's them playing a really high line, this time shooting from left to right against Benfica, exactly what I'm talking about. I was there. This is the high line, can you see it? They're shooting from left to right in the black.
Look,
Yeah,
right there.
yeah, this is what they did. Benfica was just playing the ball from wide or from the middle, over the top, like a diagonal curved ball. You can get in behind, and that's what you do. But you have to do that early, because eventually they get into their flow state, and then they're impossible to stop.
Yeah.
It's what happens a lot with Barcelona this season. They're really fun to watch, and they can just do you in once they get in there. But if you can stop them, that's it. But there's also one more interesting thing about this game to look out for. Mm-hmm. Here's the most interesting thing about the game. There's an eagle.
Look at him soar.
It's a nice eagle, isn't it, John?
I think that would be a really useful method of carrying a ring.
And I think that's the most interesting thing about the game.
What a nice eagle that was. Yes. Okay, now tell me, who is going to win the champion? Well, don't tell me that, because that will ruin the fun. Okay, let's start with the round of 16 then, John. On the right-hand side, tell me who's going to make it through these first games.
Yeah, there's some fun fixtures, aren't there? I'm going to go with Barcelona getting through against Benfica. So
As long as they watch out for that eagle.
I think in the second fixture, Dortmund-Lille, I'm going to go for an upset here. I'm going to go for Lille winning.
Oh,
So we're going to have a Barcelona-Lille quarter-final.
lovely.
The Bayern game, really tough to call.
Bayern is hard.
Yeah, it's hard to say,
Do you want
and
me
it's
to
also
decide
hard to
for you?
predict.
I can
Yeah,
decide for you.
You do it.
I think Leverkusen are going
You
through.
think Leverkusen going through?
Over 2 legs, I think Leverkusen are
Wow.
going through.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that.
Why not? You know?
And then, yeah, I'm going to go the boring option on the next game. So Inter go through there.
Okay.
But that sets us up with some really cool quarterfinals.
It really does. Pause there. Let's go to the left-hand side of the bracket, JJ. Please do the same thing. PSG, Liverpool?
I think Liverpool will go through.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay.
I think Aston Villa will go through.
Yeah, okay.
I think Real Madrid will go through.
Okay.
I think Arsenal will go through.
I mean, there's some mighty fine fixtures, aren't they? Right, fine. Back to John. Oh, it's getting exciting. Back to John. Right-hand side, Barcelona-Lille.
Yeah, I think the Lille journey ends in the quarters, I'm afraid.
Sure.
So Barcelona are going to get through.
Okay. And now I've picked Leverkusen for you against Inter.
Yeah, I'm going to say Leverkusen again against Inter. Yeah.
All right, great, fine, exciting. JJ, Liverpool Villa? And now don't like this one's a tough one because Aston Villa drew with Liverpool fairly recently, didn't they?
Unai Emery is the master of knockout European competition.
Yeah.
He always wins.
Yeah, and who wouldn't want to see Aston Villa play Real Madrid in the semi-final? I mean, come on.
Well, genuinely, I think what's going to happen is this. I think it just feels like it could happen.
It feels right, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And what about Real Madrid Arsenal? What feels right there?
That's easy. They go through
that
there.
feels
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
I think Arsenal could cause problems.
Do you
I think
so?
they could if they had the great players up top still. They had like Saka and Martinelli and all the ones.
But you don't need to score, do you? You just need to draw twice and win on penalties.
I just think Real Madrid will find a way to score against them. I agree with you because the way they play is like perfect for stopping Real Madrid from playing. I just think they'll not have enough to do it.
I don't really know who's going to win that, but I do know that I'd much rather see Real Madrid play Aston Villa than Arsenal play Aston Villa, you know, as a semi-final. It's just more exciting in
I hadn't even
Champions
thought
League.
that. Yeah, that would be bad.
Yeah. Oh, well, all that's left is for us to decide a final. John? Barcelona versus Leverkusen. It's hard.
No, I'm going to do Barcelona, I'm afraid. I don't know. I think that would be a great fixture, Barcelona-Leverkusen. I think Leverkusen, like with Xabi Alonso, have been fantastic at coming up against all kinds of opponents and causing them problems. So I could see them causing Barcelona problems, but I think by this point, Barcelona will be on a roll.
And JJ, Aston Villa or Real Madrid?
The whole thing's been rigged from the start to have a Real Madrid-Barcelona finish.
There we go. It could be a Classico Champions League final, which would be appropriate and exciting, I suppose, wouldn't it? So, well done to everyone involved. Bye!
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Amy Lawrence and James Horncastle. With the latest transfer news and insights on every Premier League story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football, and you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.